Is loneliness a disease that necessitates a cure? If men could be made to believe so, think of the potential profit to be made from and the potential for manipulation of men. The real test for a man is how he lives with himself alone. Precious few men ever truly allow themselves to be alone and learn real, singular independence and self-reliance. The vast majority of guys, see betas, particularly in Western culture, tend to transition from mother to wife with little or no intermission between. For the most part, they subscribe to the feminine imperative, becoming serial monogamous, going from LTR to LTR until they settle without ever having learned and matured into how to interact as an adult. The fear of loneliness is entirely too exaggerated in modern Western romanticism. The popularized fear mythology of becoming the lonely old man who never loved is the new old maid myth made popular in an era when a woman's worth was dependent upon her marital status and, at least now, equally as false a premise. But in our brave new Generation AFC, men who've become women are repackaged and shamed into believing this horseshit as part and parcel of feminized gender role reversal. Thus, we get speed dating and eHarmony and a host of other conveniences to pacify the insecurities that this reversal instills. I'm going to suggest that most AFCs, most feminized conditioned males, like and embrace the lonely old man myth because it is a buffer against potential rejection. Does that sound like a stretch? It shouldn't. When used from a feminized perspective, this myth is most certainly a shaming social convention with the latent function of getting men to commit to a feminine frame. You better change yourself soon, or your soulmate might pass you by, and you'll be lonely and destitute in your old age. That's the feminized use of the myth. However, the internalized AFC use of the myth is a buffer. This then becomes his rationale for settling for a substandard LTR or marriage. Better to marry a shrew than suffer loneliness. It's really a triple whammy. There's the feminine reinforced fear of solitude. Then the self-reinforced expectation of maturity or doing the right thing. And finally, the use of it as a convenient retreat from rejection or potential rejection. And this is what I'm getting at when I refer to it as a buffer. Case example. I have a friend who is trapped in a passionless marriage with a woman who set the frame from day one. He'd like to come off as dominant with his male friends, but it's clear to most of our friends that his wife owns the frame of the marriage. Prior to meeting this girl, our friend was a serial monogamous branch swinger. The LTR girl he'd been with prior to her ran the show in much the same way for almost 5 years. When he was finally freeing himself from her, with a bit of my own help, he started to see the value of being single and independent and began dating non-exclusively for about a 3-month period. After meeting his now wife, he gradually tried to find suitable ways to withdraw and become exclusive. Knowing what our reaction would be in so swift a time frame, he began searching for all kinds of rationales to effect this, and settled on the myth of the lonely old man. His story was the classic one, where a guy shakes off his old ways of thinking about women and dating and almost unplugs from the matrix, but fails to kill his inner AFC and slides back into his old beta mentality once he'd secured another soulmate. Here was a guy who'd spent more than half of his 20s in a miserable LTR, who managed to briefly unplug for about 3 months before latching onto another one-itis. Yet his reasoning was, I'm tired of the dating games. I need to settle down. I don't want to be lonely when I'm 60. This from a guy who'd only ever been single for 3 months of his life. It was his buffer. Of course, now he's resentful and pensive about his marriage and lives life vicariously through his single friends, while at the same time self-righteously scolds them for still being single.